Welcome back to Proline TV. Greg DePalma here as we get ready to preview the NFL playoffs for the 2024-2025 season. And this is an annual deal here with the three of us. Marc Lawrence, of course, who's been on hiatus, working his ass off and moving. But we finally got him back on the air here. Not so late too, because we have a big playoffs getting ready to get underway here. That's what we're all about. Also, Ryan Dunleavy is joining us. Last time I think we've seen Ryan was when we previewed the season several months back. How's it going, Ryan?
Good. Mark, is that your real background or is that fake? If so, I got to come visit your house.
Well, I would say I'll give you the email address to my house, but it's really just a green screen backdrop.
Wow, that is nice, man. That is nice.
You know what it looks like? Who was the Arizona coach that
Kingsbury? Yep.
Who was that?
Kingsbury.
Did you ever see his house that he lived in over there?
Yeah.
It's sort of what it is. You know what I mean? It's the backdrop of kind of what his house is like. He had like a $3 million place in Arizona.
Yep. Nice.
Exactly.
Yep.
Well, he's actually earning his money this year. That's for sure. Jim Feist is going to join us, and he'll be chiming on in here in the next several minutes. I have predictions from everybody. So we've all made our predictions, and that's what we're here to do. Go through the playoffs and give our predictions. We'll have the updated futures that we'll go over as well, and maybe we can help you win some money during the playoffs. Before we get started, Ryan, just want to again reintroduce Ryan, who is with the New York Post. Ryan normally covers the New York Giants, also some of the New York Jets, and then gets to also freelance NFL with the New York Post once the New York Jets and the Giants seasons are pretty much over, like they are now, except of course the Giants are looking for head coach. So Ryan, I'm sure that's keeping you busy as well.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I'll be at some playoff games. I'll be at the Super Bowl. I'll be trying to figure out who the next Jets and GM coach is and trying to figure out what the hell the Giants are doing.
Yeah, that's if you could figure that out, I think they'd hire you.
That's probably the hardest thing to figure out of all the things I just said.
Yeah.
I have an easier time picking the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So who's your best guess right now? Is it way too early to guess on who the Jets are going to wind up going with?
Yeah, I think it's too early to guess. If I had to guess, I think they'll end up with experience in one spot or the other. So maybe that looks like Ryan Grigson or Thomas Dimitroff at GM with a first-time coach, or maybe that looks like Matt Nagy or Steve Spagnuolo or somebody like that as head coach with a first-time GM. I think they'll have experience in one of the two spots.
Yeah, I'll take that Kansas City spot. I'll take their assistant GM with either Spagnuolo or Nagy, even though I think I'd rather go with Nagy because he's on the offensive side. And the Jets just so much need an offensive head coach. I mean, they've had one in what, the last 30 years, and that guy obviously didn't do a great job a few years back, but don't blame everything on Adam Gase. You know, I mean, just because he didn't work out doesn't mean another offensive guy won't. So
is Rex Ryan in the mix there, Ryan, or is it just
Here's what I would tell you about Rex Ryan. I think if the Jets, I don't know who their top candidates are, but say they strike out on their top three candidates and it looks like it's becoming one of those like, oh, no one wants to go there, embarrassment type moves. He's how they save face. He's the guy who wants the job. He's the guy fans will be excited about. So if they're whoever their top three are, if they end up in, Tennessee, or Tennessee doesn't need a coach, say they end up in Vegas and New England, Vrabel was probably their top choice, and one other spot, and they're like, oh my God, it's our fourth choice. They could just throw everybody a bone and go with Rex and build easy excitement.
Wow. Good to know.
All right. So I'm sure we won't be talking about the Jets or Giants the rest of the show, or they're out of the way because we're talking about playoff teams now. So let's go into our playoff preview. And before we do, guys, I guess let me ask you first, you, Marc, give me the team that surprised you out of all these teams that are in the postseason right now. Which team surprised you the most this season?
That got here or just played over well, surprisingly?
Either way.
I would say of the teams that got here, perhaps I was anti-Houston from the get-go, and I know that they suffered a dearth of wide receiver talent this year, and I was really surprised that they scratched and clawed and made their way here. But I would say Washington would have to probably check that box, just the fact that they had a rookie quarterback, a new head coach. They weren't much last year, so I would say kudos to the Washington Commanders.
Ryan?
Yeah, to me, it's one of the two teams with a rookie quarterback. I mean, I know CJ Stroud got there last year. It's still exceedingly hard to make the playoffs with a rookie quarterback. Washington winning 12 games is probably my number one choice. I think I picked them to be last in the NFC East. They won 12 games. That's remarkable. And then just as good as the Broncos, who won, made the playoffs in what I think is probably the NFL's toughest division right now. They won 10 games with a rookie quarterback who not everybody believed in Jaden Daniels. Not everybody believed in Bo Nix. So what he did and what they did, I think, is just as surprising, even though they don't have quite as good a record. I'd say if you ask me which one is more of a surprise, probably Denver, but I picked both teams to finish in last place.
And how about the teams? This is going to be an easy one for Ryan. Marc, which team that did not make the playoffs surprised you the most in a negative way?
In a negative way, the team that did not make the playoff, I think the obvious answer is the Cincinnati Bengals, who closed like a racehorse, and they had Joe Burrow playing MVP type football this football season, and not to make the playoffs. I guess that's why the defensive coordinator had to bite the bullet and receive the pink slip because of that. But I would say for what Cincinnati was last year, the fact they missed the playoffs, Joe Burrow really, really worked hard in the offseason. He promised a lot, and they failed to deliver. I think that's the biggest disappointment.
Ryan, this is an easy answer, I think.
Jets. Jets. I forget. I think I had them in my Super Bowl. Either the AFC Championship or my Super Bowl loser. I waffled back and forth on them and the Chiefs in the offseason. I think I ended up picking them here to go to the Super Bowl and lose to the Eagles. I'm stunned. I really am. I mean, if you told me Aaron Rodgers was going to play all 17 games, put up the stats that he put up, I would have picked them to be like 11-6, not 5-12. So I think firing Robert Saleh, who I don't think is a great head coach, but firing him when they did, how they did, blew up the whole season. The defense played nowhere near its expectations. They even added Devontae Adams, who wasn't even on the team when I picked him to go to the Super Bowl, and he played well, and they still stunk. It's hard to believe. They were they played the same game every week. They were in it in the fourth quarter and had the ball late with a chance to tie or win and couldn't do anything.
Yeah, I was talking about all season after that, especially they made that move, how bad the coaching was this season. I mean, I think they're still talented enough next season where if they get the right coach in, they make a few moves, that they can still be competitive. But the coaching is just completely let them down. It's let them down really throughout this whole Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh marriage, and it really blew up this year. So the team that disappointed me the most was the Cleveland Browns. Really thought that the Browns, considering what they did last year, and there was a lot of talk in the preseason that Deshaun Watson was going to be okay, and we're going to get back to being Deshaun Watson, and we got, Dorsey's here, and he's going to help him and all that stuff, and Chubb is back. But really, Chubb never came back until midseason, and when he wasn't effective, and the offensive line was a disgrace. And Callahan left, who's a guru, and we talked about that as a possibility that would be a big issue. And boy, did we underestimate what an issue that was. So it's just incredible how that team just fell apart this past season.
I mean, they really completely fell apart. In fact, I know at some point in this show, Greg, you're going to bring it up, and I may as well come front and center with it right now. The Cleveland Browns were my choice to make the Super Bowl this football season here. I'll admit it up front right now. Bottom line here is I think they were as deeply disappointed as any team in the National Football League.
I agree with you guys that they were disappointing because they made the playoffs last year, but this is as simple as Deshaun Watson's not good anymore. And we act like they have a quarterback because he was good at one point, but they have as big a quarterback hole as the Giants or the Raiders, etc. And their problem is worse because they're not just the Giants have no quarterback, but they have no money tied up in quarterback. That Browns have no quarterback, but they have $255 million tied up in quarterback.
Yeah, the whole the story that came out about how a couple of people wrote that the Browns now have to rethink their strategy in the draft because Deshaun Watson had a setback. It's like, who are you guys paying any attention to what's going on in Cleveland? Because obviously you're not. Deshaun Watson, they restricted his contract not to play him. He's just sitting on the bench. He's never playing again for the Browns. He's just not.
I don't know if he's never playing again, but he certainly cannot be handed the job like a former Pro Bowl starter. I mean, I can't say he's never playing.
Well, then he'd have to turn back the clock and be the player he was.
I mean, they play 4 quarterbacks a year in Cleveland, so
well, then that's true.
He could be the guaranteed money backup, and then he's in the game.
No one's left. Come on, Deshaun.
Yeah,
he could be the best of those 4 if he was able to find his way onto the playing field.
Yeah,
Ryan, let me ask you this question: the Browns' quarterback issue being what it is, we know all about Watson and the backups and yada yada yada. If they find that Kirk Cousins' arm is not dead, do you see Kirk Cousins signing with the Browns and joining Kevin Stefanski next year?
Well, that's 2 things, right? The answer to yes is because him and Stefanski go way back to having productive seasons together with the Vikings. And then the answer to no is Kirk Cousins cut? Because if he's cut, then you can get him on a Russell Wilson deal where you're paying him the minimum, and the Falcons are footing the whole bill like the Steelers got this year. If he's traded, somebody has to pick up like $27.5 million. Which isn't a lot for a quarterback, but it's a lot when you're already paying Deshaun Watson's quarterback. Like $27.5 million is nothing for the Giants to pay a quarterback, but for the Browns, now you're tying up, I don't know what it is. Can't do fast math, but like $85 million at quarterback, that would be insane.
Well, would also, if they're able to land Cousins and the deal went the way you said, that Falcons cut him, they picked him up, signed him cheap, it would probably allow them an opportunity to maybe draft Travis Hunter, who is said to be head and shoulders the best player in the National Football League draft. So out of the number 2 position, they could end up obviously a little bit better next season than they were this year.
Correct. They would be back in the playoff mix with Hunter and Cousins. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see which teams are going to be tough enough to discount the fact that we need a quarterback, but we really shouldn't be taking these guys in the top 5 because they're not top 5 picks. So which head coaches, which general managers, which front office will be able to look their fan base in the face and say, look, we know we need a quarterback, but we're just not going to do it. We're just not. These guys don't deserve to be picked here, and we're not going to do it. But
the answer to that, Greg.
Yeah, I know.
It's the guys with equity. The first year Titans GM, whoever that is, will be able to give you an honest, I want these guys, I'm going to pick them, or they're not very good and it's my first year, so I don't have to worry about it, and pass on them. The Giants GM and head coach, and they're entering their 4th year on the hot seat, are probably going to have to force it, even though they said they would not.
Yep, absolutely. Great point. Okay, before we get going here, I'm going to show the futures so everybody can check them out. These are over at DraftKings. Wait, let me pop them up here. Don't want to get the wrong one. Okay, there it is. All right. So these are the few Super Bowl futures. And before we all go through our picks, let's go down to some of the longer shots. So let's go right about here. Okay. Out of these 8 teams, which one of these 8 do you think has the best chance of getting to the Super Bowl? Based on the odds too. Knowing that, hey, if I go with the Steelers, I'm getting, triple than if I go with the Chargers. So go with some strategy as well. We'll start with you, Mark. Which way would you go here if you only had to pick one team here in the futures, and knowing that you can get more money if you go ahead and pick some of those other teams, but obviously, hey, 25-1, 28-1, 30-1, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, the biggest bang for the buck, and that's what it's all about, is an ROI, return on your investment, I think would be the LA Rams, who I think are really, really under the radar right now and playing some really good football. And I expect them to go deep into the playoffs here. They have a big, huge quarterback experience edge in this first playoff game. and I think that's going to help vault them moving forward. I think they would be the price per se, if you will. And if you weren't looking at price and you were just looking at a team, perhaps to maybe soldier on, move forward, perhaps Tampa Bay, only because it's hard to dismiss a team that's won their division 4 years in a row and they still don't get any love, if you will, per se. But give me the Rams for the long shot.
Yeah, what's interesting, Ryan, is that the NFC had a better top. It seemed like that they were a better conference this year depth wise, but if you shrink it and you get to those top teams, like those top 3 or 4 teams, that just seems like the AFC still has the edge. Do you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think that's an easier path to get through the NFC than it is to get through the AFC.
Yeah, especially with the Lions' injury issues. That's a wide open possibility now. I think there's no doubt if they were a healthy team, they would. I mean, look, they're still the favorite, and they're not healthy, but they're vulnerable because of their health issues. And that is something that could make things interesting in the NFC. Do you have a team in there that you'd throw a couple of bucks on if you had a couple of free bucks? And again, keeping in mind, I'm saying to make it, because even if they don't win the Super Bowl, maybe you can hedge your bet, make a few bucks anyway. So who would you go with?
So hypothetically, because I don't gamble, so hypothetically, I would say if I did, the Packers would be my choice to have the best chance, because their first game, Jalen Hurts is banged up. Concussion. It looks like he's practicing, but if he's not practicing, you could almost make a case they should be favored over the Eagles. If he's not playing. And then even with them, they have a good quarterback who looked good in last year's playoffs. So they're kind of sitting there to me as a sleeper team. And then if I wanted the bang for the buck, a lot more than triple the odds, I would go with the Steelers just based on their defense and head coach. As long as Russell Wilson doesn't implode in games, they could make a run.
All right. So I completely agree with the Packers. I think they're more than capable of winning that first round game. The question is do they have what it takes to run through the NFC this season and the postseason? I don't know. I expected a little bit more to Jordan Love at this point. I really did. He had some good run last season. I don't see the same quarterback this year, but maybe he'll turn it on at the right time.
We've seen Joe Flacco and Eli Manning do that, right? You just need a great 4 games this time of year.
Absolutely.
Does Russell Wilson have 4 good games in him? That's a question I have to ask of you, though.
I don't think Russell Wilson does, but that defense could throw 4 10-point games on the board.
I understand. Right.
Yeah. Interesting how things change so quickly for the Steelers, but that's been the story of the NFL this season. These highs, these lows, these ups, these downs, and but that's also the case with the playoffs. If you can kind of, even if you're where the Steelers are now entering the playoffs, maybe they turn it on and can win 2-3 straight in order to get to the Super Bowl. Unlikely, but I guess anything's possible. All right, so let's go ahead and get started in the AFC first. So we will start. I'm just taking a look at how we all compared here. And again, I'm sure Jim Feist is going to jump on here in a little while too. But before he does, I do see that 3 of us have the Chiefs taking on the Chargers. The only one who doesn't is Marc. And he's going to go with that Houston Texans team that he doubted this season to win over the Chargers as a home underdog. So we'll start with you on that. Why are you going with Houston to kind of change your mind a little bit?
Well, first of all, a lot of handicapping goes into what I'm looking at, as opposed to looking at it just from a how they're going to play the game on the field type aspect. Home underdogs in wild card rounds have been fantastic. To the point spread, 24-10, better than 50% on the blind. This is a Houston football team, as I mentioned before, that scratched and clawed and got their way here. The Chargers come into this football game. Herbert has never won a playoff game, and you got this huge home field advantage here. I think the Chargers are going to be exposed here. They played 7 playoff teams this year, and they only won 2 of those games. Now you're going to ask them to win a game on the road to a quarterback that might have a little bit of revival in him here. I think Houston's a surprise this weekend on the National Football League playoff card.
Ryan, was that a tough call for you?
The Texans-Chargers game?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it was. I think it was. I think the Texans end up in this spot every year, right? The Saturday afternoon AFC South winner playoff game, and then some years they win it, some years they don't. I think it was a tough call. I was down on the Chargers before the year. The Chargers are one of the more remarkable stories in the NFL. They let go of Pro Bowl talent like everywhere, added a head coach, and got better. Like that I mean, that shows you the Jim Harbaugh effect, and that's basically why I picked him in the game.
Yeah, and again, I did the same. We've got the Chiefs and the Chargers, and the other matchup is Buffalo and Baltimore. If those two teams win their home games, and all of us believe that is exactly what is going to happen, that the 2 and the 3 seed will face each other next week. And Mark, which one of those 2 games worries you more? Buffalo's opponent with Denver or Baltimore's opponent with Pittsburgh? And by the way, that is a big spread. 10 points with the Steelers. I did not expect that spread to be so big. Rivals. Steelers have actually done pretty well in this rivalry lately. I know what happened. We all know what happened not too long ago, but that was an anomaly. I guess we have to be concerned with Pickens. What's going on there? What happened to him in the Bengals game? Is he not back 100%? Doesn't look like it. There are a lot of worrying signs there, but still, that's 10 points. That's a lot to give up in a rivalry game.
So you're asking me which of those 2 games, the Bills game and the Baltimore game, worries me the most about which team will win in advance? Is that the question?
Yeah. Which one are you more worried about? You more worried about Denver upsetting your Bills or Pittsburgh upsetting your Ravens?
I would be worried about the Buffalo Bills here. I think Baltimore, I'm just going to spill the beans and say that they're going to win the Super Bowl.
Wow.
But I'm looking at here a Buffalo football team that if you break them down and you look at how they fared against fellow playoff teams, they allowed 33 points a game against other fellow playoff teams. That's the highest in National Football League history. This defense is not what you ask for a football team to lead you to the promised land. On the other side, this Denver defense is rock solid tough. They played tough against other fellow playoff teams. Did Denver this football season here? That's the one game that would concern me the most. If I'm Sean McDermott, I think this is a real tough game for him to have to get out of and advance onto the playoffs here, because I don't see Pittsburgh. I could see Pittsburgh giving Baltimore fits only because of the closest of the series. The 2 teams know each other real well. 45% of the games this millennium have been decided by 3 or less points. All that good stuff there maybe factors into Pittsburgh getting Baltimore to play down to their level. But if I'm Buffalo, I'm really not sleeping well at night, wondering about how I'm going to get past Denver here.
Mark, send me that Bills defense stat. I'll use that in my coverage. I'll
sure.
attribute it to you.
It's in the guide that I sent you. Okay.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I'll use that. I'm more worried about the Steelers. I'm more worried about the Ravens for the reasons Mark just said. The familiarity breeds content. The 2 coaches know each other like the back of their hands. Lamar Jackson always has a hard time against Tomlin defenses, except for the last game they just played. But before that, throughout his career, I think he's 3-5 against the Steelers in his career. And the Ravens usually have the better team, which tells you that he struggles. So yeah, I would say, and his playoff numbers are not good. I mean, he just had an all-time quarterback season, whether he wins the MVP or not. Lamar Jackson just had an all-time quarterback season, 41 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions, 4,000 yards. But he's 6 touchdowns and 6 picks with a 2-4 playoff record. So I'm not going to put stock in him until the Aaron Judge watcher in me says, do it in the playoffs, dude.
So. Hey, I'm 100% there with you, Ryan. No question about it. He has to, if they're going to win a Super Bowl, like Mark says, it can't be a situation where Bull wins an ugly game against Pittsburgh, 13-13, and it's just one of those rough outings for Lamar. That was just a Berg, it's nothing to do with. He needs to start turning it, and it has to happen right away. We got to see a different Lamar Jackson in the postseason. And another reason too is their defense is just not the same. It's not. that they should never have given this job to Orr. He was in over his head. Luckily, they were able to bring Dean Pease in. And once he came in as an assistant, sort of like a consultant, boy, all of a sudden the defense started to play better. So, but I still think their defense is not anywhere near it used to be. Very scary Baltimore Raven playoff defense. So he's going to have to put up big numbers. And I don't know. I agree with you. I'm not so sure I trust that. So we'll see. Okay. Now,
one quick follow-up here before we turn this page here, Greg, if I may.
Sure.
Not to beat a horse to death here, but this Buffalo defense that I'm kind of pounding against. Only, if you take a look this football season, only New England, Tennessee, and Cincinnati allowed more points against current playoff teams than did Buffalo. To me, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, there was a point this season where I was like, you know what, I think Buffalo, that's going to be my pick. And then all of a sudden, especially those back-to-back games against Detroit and the Rams, it's like, I don't trust their defense. I just don't. I mean, if you put them in a situation against these other teams, especially the Chiefs who have a good defense, it's like, why would I take the Bills? And by the way, Ryan, do you think, and I don't think anybody's been talking about this outside of Buffalo, I guess even on the talk shows, they probably have, mentioned this, but if they somehow get upset by Denver, is that it for McDermott?
Oh, I would think so. I mean, that would be a very, very hard sell. I've been talking about that for weeks. I think they're the team that has the most pressure on them in the playoffs of anybody. Yeah, the Chiefs could go for a 3-peat. Yeah, the Eagles have a Saquon Barkley ticking clock, but I think the Bills are the team with a one and done could be devastating for Sean McDermott because that team, the window is now. That quarterback is awesome. They keep falling short in the playoffs. They haven't been to the AFC Championship game since 2020. People forget that. So, if they're looking at what can we change, the next thing they can change is the head coach.
Okay. By the way, the money lines are Denver's about 350, Pittsburgh's close to 4-1. So there you go. In case you want to, if you want to bet some money on an upset there for either of those teams. Okay. Let's now move on and then to the I guess the next round in the AFC. And Ryan and I are in agreement. We both have Kansas City and Buffalo. Jim has Kansas City and Baltimore, and Marc has Kansas City and Baltimore. So first of all, let's talk about the way that would have to go after that, though, since we already have discussed it. But it would be the Chiefs for Ryan and me. Also, Jim has the Chiefs, and Marc, of course, has already let the cat out of the bag that he likes Baltimore. What about the Chiefs, Ryan? So we three of us like the Chiefs to go back to the Super Bowl. I'll admit, for half of the season, I kind of felt the same way last year. Nah, it can't be the Chiefs this year. This is going wrong. That's going wrong. This just doesn't seem right. And then all of a sudden, just like last year, a little bit earlier than last year, I didn't really get back on the Kansas City bandwagon until the playoffs started. But all of a sudden, like a month or so ago, you started realizing, well, you know what? Some of these guys that have been banged up and not around are going to come back. And they're as healthy as they've been all season now. And even though they still have problems on the offensive line, and that's not going away, but everybody has problems. They're still a complete football team, and they've got the best coaching staff, and they've got the great quarterback who now realizes, I'm not sure if he's going to use it as motivation, but, he's not a Pro Bowl quarterback in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, you have the best coach and the best quarterback, and you have a cast of guys who know how to win close games. I don't know how anybody could pick anybody else. I honestly, what do I look for? I look for a great coach, Andy Reid, check. Great quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, check. How does the team know how to win close games in the playoffs? That's all they do is win close games in the playoffs. So one of the stats I hate the most that people pound on is like, oh, well, so many of their wins are in close games. Well, the same people that turn around and say, well, every game in the NFL is a one-score game and you got to know how to win it. Like, I can't kill you for being whatever they are, 11-1 in close games or whatever, and then be like, oh, they play too many close games. Every game's close and they win everyone. They're not coin flips with the Chiefs. It's a double-sided coin when the Chiefs play. Both sides have the Chiefs logo on it.
That's a great point. You beat who's in front of you, and it doesn't matter how you did it as long as you beat that football team. Sure, Kansas City's 11-0 in one-score games this year. That's absolutely phenomenal. By the way, the Rams are the second best team in one-score games this year. They won or 9 games that way this year. So, but Kansas City, like you say, how do you put a team down because all they do is keep winning football games, but they don't win them impressively enough? That's hogwash. They just keep winning football games. I just happen to feel I have a little bit more of an edge, and I'll explain that to you when they get to meet Baltimore later on in the championship round.
I think part of this comes from 2 years ago, the Vikings were like 11-0 or 11-1 in one-score games, and then they got upset by the Giants in the first round of the playoffs, and everybody was like, see, they were a paper tiger. Well, you know what? They were a paper tiger because they had never been there, done this before. You're talking about a team that's 11-1 that's won the last 2 Super Bowls. That's not paper tiger. That's knowing how to get it done in tight moments.
And speaking of that potential Baltimore-Buffalo matchup, if you do think about it, that, and we all have, I guess, see, Mark, you've got Baltimore, we've got Buffalo, but if Baltimore does get past Buffalo, you'd think that maybe they are going to then be a tougher matchup, or at least I would think maybe they are a tougher matchup than Buffalo because of the fact that they'll have better coaching. I think we can give them that for sure. And that Lamar Jackson then will have played 2 playoff games. He'll be in a championship game, and then maybe that means that he's playing well. So if Lamar Jackson's playing well and you've got a really good coaching staff, that probably is the type of team that can go into Kansas City and pull off the upset. So, I'll look at it that way, is that if they can beat Buffalo, I actually think maybe they do have a better chance in Buffalo beating the Chiefs.
Well, what you've got in that Baltimore-Buffalo matchup will be, I think, 2 quarterbacks that each are deserving of the MVP award. I think one is hungrier. That's Lamar Jackson because it's Josh Allen that gets all the credit, all the love. He doesn't get any because he's purported to be a choke artist when it comes to be playoff time. But, all it takes is one time to get to the finish line first, and that choke artist role is gone. It's dead and buried forever. And I think that's the makeup of Lamar Jackson this particular football season. I think he's playing his best football ever this football season here. And you also take a look at these 2 teams. You weigh the difference, Baltimore-Buffalo this year. Baltimore fared really well against other playoff teams. 10 times they faced them, 7 times they won. Take a look at Buffalo. They faced 5 other playoff teams and only won 2 times. So I think Baltimore's tried and tested. They've been tougher in football games against the ilk that they're going to be playing here this way. That's one of the reasons I like Baltimore to get past Buffalo.
I was sitting on the 50-yard line stuffing my face with hot dogs last year when Lamar Jackson at home had a terrible game against that Steve Spagnuolo defense in the AFC Championship game. It's etched in my brain. Can't forget it. I see Buffalo beat Kansas City literally every single year. I see them beat them in the regular season. They've done it 4 years in a row, and then they just can't do it in the playoffs. So if you're asking me who the bigger threat is to Kansas City, I'll say Buffalo because I've seen them win the game, just not in the playoffs, but I've seen them win the game. And Lamar Jackson versus getting tormented by Spags and Chris Jones, Trent McDuffie, that's just etched in my brain.
I hear you. I get it completely.
Yeah, so we'll see how that all unfolds. And if we can get a Baltimore-Buffalo matchup, that could be really nice. And what could help Baltimore, though, could be the fact that if they get through this, they're on the road. And that might help them. Because anytime you have a team, and specifically a really good player that's struggling in the postseason, I think the best thing for him is not to be at home. Don't have that added pressure. Don't be the favorite. Don't be you're supposed to win the game. No, go on the road. Because I guess, Mark, if they're at Buffalo, they're going to be a short dog, correct?
Oh, they'll be a small dog, probably 1.5 or 2 points.
Yeah.
It'll be that close, yes.
Yeah. So that would be it would be considered an upset. They're on the road, and that could be something. And then they'd go to Kansas City as a dog. So maybe that's what he needs in order to change things in the postseason. All right. So once again, I've got the Chiefs. Ryan, you also have the Chiefs. And Mark, you've got Baltimore. And before I finish the AFC, we are going to bring in Jim Feist, who has decided to join us finally. Thank you, Jim.
Well, this is like, I think it's like podcast day of 6 podcasts in 4 hours. So it's a very difficult time.
Well, these are the most important ones because this is your own channel. So you're ready to go, right, Jim?
But I cannot relay on a promise that I made. Hello, everybody, and nice to meet you, Ryan.
Nice to meet you.
All right, so we just went over the AFC, Jim, and we gave over the predictions. So you have the Chiefs and the Chargers, the Bills and Baltimore coming up after this week. You also have the Chiefs beating Baltimore, and the Chiefs once again going to the Super Bowl. That's what I think. Mark has Baltimore, and Ryan also has Kansas City. So the three of us have the Chiefs returning to the Super Bowl in the AFC. And before we move on, though, tell me if you can, at least for this week's game, because I asked this question to these guys here. Tell me, out of Denver and Pittsburgh, since you picked the other teams, which one of those teams do you think has the best chance of winning the game outright?
Neither one.
So which one has the best chance of winning the game outright?
Neither one.
Make a pick, Jim.
Let's look at it this way. Pittsburgh didn't build their offense to win the Super Bowl. They got a guy from that. Denver's paying him more money than Pittsburgh's paying him at quarterback. So that's Russell Wilson. Don't let Russell burn. Don't let him roll anymore. You got to burn the guy's done. And Tomlin's got to get with the modern age and build an offense that can move the ball, because they can't move the ball. They've lost 4 games in a row. They're a mess. They just got beat up by this guy. You got Henry, who's run over 1,900 yards for the season already. You got Lamar, which is a great quarterback. You want to compare Lamar to Wilson? I mean, and then you got the wide receiver for Pittsburgh, who all he does is complain and drop the ball. I mean, so they're a mess. And they're not going to win. Okay, maybe they could cover, because when you give anybody 10 points, it's possible to cover. The other side is you got Knicks, who I like a lot, and I like Sean Payton a lot, and I like the way they're playing defense a lot. However, he's a rookie going on the road in the playoffs, and statistically, that is a nightmare. Take a rookie, put him in a situation like that against a team with Josh Allen and a head coach that's been to the playoffs a number of times in a row. I mean, they're gonna give him a hard time, a real hard time, because he just is not going to hold up well against this pressure.
All right. Well, it's time to move on to the NFC, and let's go ahead and take a look at how the matchups look here across the board with everyone else. Let's see. Jim's got Detroit and Minnesota, and Philly, Tampa. Mark, you also have Philly and Tampa, but you have Detroit and LA. So a little bit of a disagreement there. I have Detroit and Green Bay, and Tampa Bay and the Rams, and Ryan has Detroit, Washington, and Philly, Minnesota. So I like the fact that we're all over the board here. This is the way it should be. Let's start, first of all, with that Minnesota game with the Rams. And I'll let you start, Ryan. Minnesota, the Rams, they played before. We've got 2 rematches. Tampa Bay and Washington also played before. So Rams beat Minnesota, same venue. Again, Minnesota is coming off a terrible loss. A lot of people have no idea, where that came from. Is that going to be something that we're going to move on over into the playoffs, or is that just going to be forgotten after they dispose of the Rams? And overall, you believe that they are going to dispose of the Rams and move on. And what do you think about the game overall? Will it be close?
Yeah, I think you're looking at a close game. I love these games where it's one head coach and his protege, like McVay and Kevin O'Connell will be. What Kevin O'Connell's gotten out of Sam Darnold all year, I think, is remarkable. I think that was an aberration based on a brilliant game plan drawn up by Aaron Glenn last week. I love, the Vikings obviously have talent both sides of the ball. The Rams did not impress me late in the season. I know they won whatever it was, five of their last 6, I guess 5 in a row that they cared about. But, I mean, they beat the 49ers 12-6 and the Jets 19-9 and the Cardinals 13-9. That does not scream a team that I am that's going to be able to score enough to outscore the Vikings in the playoffs. To me, there's a reason they're one of 2 home underdogs right this weekend. So give me the Vikings to outscore the Rams.
And Jim, you agree with that?
I totally agree with Ryan, except for one thing. 100%. His analysis is absolutely exactly what I would like to say, but I'm not that glib to say it well. But this game might actually have to move. The Fires just hit Hollywood, and this game, that stadium is not totally an enclosed stadium, which means the air quality may be affect the players and the fans, and traffic issues are. So they're talking about moving this to Glendale. If it moves to Glendale, I think Minnesota will probably go to a 3-point favorite, and I think it's a favorite to move because the wind has picked up and it just hit the Hollywood Hills. So it's a disaster out there. Prayers go out to those people. It's a terrible thing going on. But I do think this is going to move to Glendale, and I think the Vikings are going to beat them up because the Rams have not played well. They lost at home to Miami. They looked ugly against Philadelphia. As Ryan pointed out, against the Jets, and I mean, they just have not. They can't put up. And the operation we had with Detroit played a great game, and they put up a great defensive effort. But there were open receivers, and Darnold missed a lot of open shots. And I have to criticize their offensive play calling. They were going with longer routes, and they could have cut those routes off and given Darnold a little bit better chance to get rid of the ball without waiting for the longer developing routes. I think there was a coaching mismatch on the Minnesota side. And I'm not saying they're as good as Detroit because I don't believe they are. But that game could have been a lot closer than it was.
Mark?
Well, I'm going to disagree with both of you guys, and I'm going to go with the team that I think is, like I say, under the radar right now and not getting a lot of love, and that's the Rams to win this football game. You have in Minnesota a football team coming up here that has a quarterback that's never thrown a pass in a playoff game, taking on an opponent with a quarterback who's been in 8 playoff games, led his team to a Super Bowl. You have a head coach, massive experience here with Sean McVay. He's won 7 of his 11 games in the playoffs, to a coach that's never been in the playoffs here as well. And I'm going to allude once again to that stat or that fact since week 8 when Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua have been playing together. They've won 8 of 11 games. And they're not getting any love here at all. And they're a home dog. I alluded before about how well wild card home dogs do in the first games. I'm going to look for that trend to continue here. I think the Rams are going to pull the upset on Minnesota. And the part that Jim talked to about last week about a masterful job that Minnesota did in that football game in really, or I should say Detroit did it in the football game against Minnesota. That was all coaching by Detroit. They just completely shut that secondary down last week. And I don't think it'll happen here in this football game. I like the Rams on the upset here.
All right. So taking a look at how things could work out, though, because we have another game, and that is going to be a game again where I'm the only one, it looks like, that has taken the Packers. I'm looking at this, actually. I even said this at the beginning of the season. I'm just not really sold on Sirianni. I know that he's had some success. I get that. But and Barkley's been such a big deal, but the Packers defense has been really well lately. And if you can stop Saquon Barkley, you have a shot. And I just think the Packers are just, if you're looking for any team in these playoffs, and we talked about it before with the futures, and you guys kind of agreed with it. If you're any team that can actually do something, it's the Packers. And I'm just going to go ahead and I think Philly being at home might work against them. We know how it can, especially if they get behind early. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Packers to win that game. But what do you guys think about the game in general? Starting with you, Mark. Do any of you guys think this is going to be like a game that goes down to the final possession, that kind of close game? Or do you think it's a game that's going to end up, before we even get too far into the fourth quarter?
Well, I think Philadelphia is going to expose Green Bay for what they are, and that's a fraud. I know that
fraud.
Yes. I like the football team early on in the season, but as the season wore on, it became evident that, they're not stepping up in these big football games like they're supposed to step up in games. And my goodness, go look at their stats, Green Bay. They played 7 playoff teams. They only won 2 of those football games. They were out-yarded on the negative side in net yardage in those football contests. Now you're going to step up against a team that has the number one defense in the league, the number one rushing attack in the football league. And if there's two parameters that you want to take with you to the Super Bowl, is running and defense. That's exactly what Philadelphia checks those boxes with. I think Green Bay gets exposed in this contest.
To Mark's point on playoff versus non-playoff, they were I'm tossing out last week against the Bears. Although I guess they did play their starter, so maybe I shouldn't. But either way, they were 11-0 or 11-1 against the rest of the league, and 0-5 against the Vikings, Lions, and Eagles, the three best teams in the NFC. They beat the Packers 5 times in 5 tries. Packers beat everybody else until last week against the Bears. So fraud might be strong for my taste, but they certainly are the second tier behind those first 3 teams. It's honestly, I have the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Spoiler. It's the game I'm most scared about them playing. Like, just because I don't know Jalen Hurts' status. I haven't seen Saquon Barkley in the playoffs except the 1 year with the Giants. They have a lot of rookies in their secondary who played really well all regular season, and now they're going to get thrown out there against the Packers' fast receivers. I guess Christian Watson probably isn't playing, right? But I haven't seen that, but I assume he got a serious knee injury.
Yeah.
Jaden Reed is dynamic. There's just a lot of elements to the Eagles that, like, I need to see them win one game, and then if they win one game, I think they're going to go to the Super Bowl.
Well put. I agree with that 100%.
Jim?
Well, Jalen Hurts is coming off the concussion protocol, which means there's usually a drop-off with quarterbacks or anybody that's coming off the concussion protocol. So there's a drop-off there. I actually believe exactly what you guys are saying, that Philadelphia's the better team and they should win this game. I just don't like laying points like this in a game like this, because I do think it's going to be a running game. I think it's an under. I think you're going to see a lot of grinding on the ground. I think they're you got the number 1 team, rushing team, and number 2 rushing team in the league in Philadelphia. I think it's 1-2, but I know they both run the ball a lot. They're in the top 3 or 4.
Yeah, Green Bay's top 5 in rushing. Yeah. I say Green Bay is a top 5 running team, yes.
So, and by the way, Mark, I love your backdrop. Is that your house? Or
I asked the same thing.
I mean, you got much better backdrop than the rest of us. We're like in a little closet. You're sitting out there in the woods. I love it. But anyway, I liked Philadelphia to win the game. So if I'm betting Philadelphia, it's going to be a money line play. But what I also like is the under. I think you're going to see a lot of clock grinding and very good defense, by the way. I think, and if Kurtz is not as dynamic as he can be normally, which is to be expected coming off a concussion, it might be a little bit more of a grind. So I do like it under, and I do like a money line on Philadelphia. And no, I don't think they're going to the Super Bowl.
Greg, let me grandstand here for a second climb onto my soapbox. How many years now have I been coming on these shows with you and screaming about running backs being undervalued in this league?
Yeah.
And how
those days are going to end soon.
And how
Bravo. That's exactly right.
Has been screaming about it for years. And now you have people picking the Ravens to go to the Super Bowl because Derrick Henry is their X factor. You have a matchup here where it's Saquon Barkley versus Josh Jacobs. You have Joe Mixon taking Houston to another level. And all of us, it's like, oh yeah, maybe these guys do matter. So
absolutely. And again, as I said before, this draft class coming out is going to be just one of the better running back draft classes we've seen as far as the depth and the talent in many years. So if you want a running back, you're going to find one in this year's draft.
What that's going to do is going to make some of these young quarterbacks look better, because they're going to have the run pass option that somebody's going to respect. You develop an offensive line that can not only pass block, but run block. I mean, whoever started that fake news garbage that running backs aren't valuable is garbage. Yeah.
Let's just roll on here. One more, and that is Ryan. You're the only one to go with Washington against Tampa Bay. And speaking of one quarterback that's not in the Pro Bowl, that's Patrick Mahomes. There's another one that's not in the Pro Bowl, and that's Baker Mayfield. Not sure exactly how that happened, but it did. And
we don't know if Mahomes will wear the Pro Bowl thing as a chip on his shoulder. He's so accomplished that, he might not really care. Yeah. Baker Mayfield will care. Baker Mayfield will be yelling Pro Bowl after every pass he completes. Like, he will care. Honestly, I see a lot of Washington, right? Obviously, I cover the NFC East a lot. So I see a lot of Washington. I just saw so much that I liked out of Washington. I saw a team that figured out how to win games different ways. I saw so much I liked from Washington. Obviously, it starts with the quarterback who transformed the whole franchise. People want to knock Dan Quinn because of the Super Bowl 8 years ago or whatever that they blew. I thought he did a really good job with that team on both sides of the ball. I thought he did a good job with his timeouts, his challenge, like everything all the strategy stuff that a quarterback does. He pulled Raheem Morris's pants down 2 weeks ago on Sunday Night Football. So I thought I think he'll do a better job than Todd Bowles in the game, who I don't love. Something about Washington. I know the stats Jim mentioned earlier that it's a nightmare to pick a rookie quarterback on the road in the playoffs. And that's why I'm not picking Denver, because they're facing a great Buffalo team. I don't think Tampa Bay is a great team. I think they're the product of a bad division. So I think Washington could end up. I think it'll be high scoring. You guys do betting. I don't do betting. I'd be interested. To me, it seems like the kind of game you would definitely take the over, not even knowing what the over-under line is. I would think it'll be a high-scoring game, and I like Washington in it. Give me Kingsbury to take back Marc's house back there.
Oh, Lord, look out.
Yeah, I'm the only one who has Tampa Bay actually getting to the championship game and facing Detroit. And as far as the rest of you guys, Ryan, you have Detroit and Philly in the championship game. Let's see, Jim, you have Detroit and Philly as well. And Marc's got Philly, but he's got the LA Rams. So Marc and I, we have a couple of different takes, but Marc's got Philly and the Rams. I have Detroit and Tampa. So we'll start with you.
Can I ask a question of Marc? Marc, you picked and you mentioned in your analysis of the Rams, home dog. What if the game is moved to Glendale?
Well, I would still like the Rams for all of the reasons we talked about, how they're playing some really good football right now. They're also being underappreciated, I think, by teams. And the experience factor I talked earlier, the head coaching experience in postseason, I think, is huge between the two coaches and the quarterback. So I would still side with the Rams in the football game.
All right, so then let's wrap it all up. Marc, again, you have Kansas City, Baltimore, with Baltimore getting to the Super Bowl and winning it. You also have Philly and the Rams, as I mentioned, with Philly getting to the Super Bowl. So we'll have a Northeast battle in the Super Bowl between the Eagles and Baltimore, and you have the Ravens winning the Super Bowl. Care to elaborate one last time on the show?
Well, I'm gonna hit on what Ryan hit, and that's a great topic about these running backs finally coming back in vogue, which they should never have been out of in the first place. But you're talking about the top two running teams in the National Football League, Philadelphia 1 and Baltimore 2, the top two running backs in the National Football League, carrying the freight and the weight and things like this. Baltimore went up against 10 other playoff teams this year, and they won the yards in all 10 football games. Wow. A perfect 10-0 sweep by Baltimore. They are not going to be intimidated by anybody in these playoffs here. And if they get this far, Baltimore and Philadelphia, that Lamar Jackson stat just jumps off the page, 24-4 in his career against NFC teams. Give me Baltimore to win the Super Bowl.
Jim, you and I, even though our paths are a little bit different, you have Kansas City, Baltimore. I have Kansas City, Buffalo. Again, I have Detroit, Tampa Bay. You have Detroit, Philly. But we both have Kansas City beating Detroit in the Super Bowl. So elaborate a little bit on why it's the Chiefs once again.
Well, first of all, I love Detroit. I have a ticket on Detroit and Kansas City going to the Super Bowl that I bet back in August, I think, or something. I think it was about August, maybe 1st of September. So it's a pretty nice ticket. If they get there, I get a nice check. But I think that the Spags, the defensive coordinator, and the defensive coordinator for Detroit. Why is it slipping my mind now?
Aaron
Glenn, right? Who did a great job the other night. These two guys they're gonna gear up some stuff, man. That's gonna be a war between those two defensive coordinators, who might be the two best right now in the league. I know Spags has been that way for a while. And then, of course, you got Andy Reid against, Dan Campbell, gunshot Dan. That's going to be a war. I mean, you got Mahomes against Goff. I mean, the offensive line for Detroit is probably superior, but the defense for the Chiefs might be better because of the health issues. And they've been there before. It's a toss-up, and I don't think you're going to see much of a spread. You're going to see a very low spread.
Who's going to be favored?
Well, I think you're going to have to favor the Chiefs until somebody beats them. But
so even though right now the Lions are the favorite in the futures, you think the Chiefs would be the favorite in a game?
It depends on how these next couple games go.
Okay,
but yeah, because they're until you beat them. I mean, they're going for the three-peat. I mean,
yeah.
I can't see you giving them points until you beat them.
They're not going to let the Chiefs be a dog in the Super Bowl for all the popularity, all the success they've had as underdogs and Patrick Mahomes. So while Detroit is the favorite right now to win the Super Bowl, I think if the two met each other, you would see Kansas City the slight favorite there.
Ryan, you have the Eagles and the Chiefs, with the Eagles winning it, and Jim brought it up, the injuries. That, again, is the deciding factor for me. I would have picked Detroit to win the Super Bowl, but when you take out two of the best players at their position on the defensive line, like the Lions are missing, I just don't think you can – I don't think you can recover in the biggest game of all if they can make it there. I just think those are the little differences between the Chiefs and the Lions. And I think that would be the kind of difference that it would take for Kansas City to win it. Now, you don't have Detroit getting that far. So I guess my question is if Detroit was healthy, would you have Detroit beating Philly, or would you still be with the Eagles?
Detroit would have been my Super Bowl pick.
Okay.
Detroit was healthy.
And you like the Eagles to win it all. Why, if they get there, will they be able to knock off the Chiefs?
So it's kind of funny, right? I'll be there. I'll be at the Super Bowl covering it. I picked the matchup that I probably want to see the least of all. Like, give me Bills
like
Lions.
Stories. Yeah, no story.
Give me Bills Lions. I'll write all day on Bills Lions. I probably.
Yeah.
Honestly, I just think the Chiefs will. People forget, like, the Chiefs. This isn't the Tyreek Hill Chiefs. Like, they don't score a bazillion points. I think there was a stat. The only teams that hadn't scored more than 30 points all year until like week 16 were like the Chiefs, the Patriots, and the Giants. You don't want to be in conversations with the Patriots and the Giants. So I just think the Chiefs are the Eagles. Again, this assumes Jalen Hurts is healthy and Jalen Hurts. Like, I just think the Eagles have too many ways to beat you. I think there's too many of those guys that are still there that have a bad taste in their mouth from losing the Super Bowl to the Chiefs a couple years ago. I think Saquon Barkley's a man on a mission. I know him obviously very well. I think he's a man on a mission. So I picked them if they get there. Yes, I would pick the Lions if they were healthy, but I will say, healthy or not, again, another thing etched in my brain is Dan Campbell's crazy fourth down decision making. And I know, like, it was brilliant. The one game against the Packers or whatever, it was brilliant a couple weeks ago when he went for a couple fourth downs and didn't allow the Packers to get the ball back. But the decisions he made when they lost that 17-point second half lead to the 49ers last year, I'd like to see if he's back in the NFC Championship, if he's going to stay true to who he is, or if he's going to be a little more cautious. I would like to see Campbell with the pressure of getting the Lions to their first ever Super Bowl appearance. That game to me would favor the Eagles. I just think all the pressure would be on the Lions.
Be a hell of a game.
And keep in mind, I mean, Marquise Brown could be the X factor for the Chiefs in that passing game. We have no idea what to expect from him. He could be a burger in these playoffs, but he could also come out and be a major weapon for Patrick Mahomes, and we haven't seen it all.
Quinyon Mitchell has locked up, as a rookie, better receivers than Marquise Brown.
All right,
I know Verse will probably win the Rookie of the Year, but if they always goes to a stacks guy, Quinyon Mitchell should be the Rookie of the Year.
All right, so there you go. That's going to wrap it up for our playoff preview, and I'm sure we're going to be back once again with a whole bunch of other videos between now and the Super Bowl. Maybe we'll get an opportunity to talk to Ryan during the Super Bowl since he's going to be there. Maybe because that's a 2-week deal once again, right? We have another bye week before the Super Bowl, and it's in New Orleans this year, right,
Yep.
Ryan?
Yep.
Going to New Orleans, so hopefully we'll talk to Ryan Super Bowl week. We'll have links in the description for Ryan's content over at the New York Post. Ryan, appreciate it.
Thanks,
nice to have you back again.
Thanks, guys.
Nice to meet you.
Jim Feist, Marc Lawrence, myself, we're going to move on over to Playbook ATS podcast right here on Proline TV. So check that out. Victor King's joining us. Andy Isco's joining us. Tony Mejia's got the week off. So hopefully
you can't give him time off. What are you doing?
Tim, well, Mark came on. So this is Tony took the opportunity to be the one to get the bye week. So Tony's off. We'll see everybody on that one and many more football videos leading up to the Super Bowl. We're also going to talk some college football as well on the Playbook ATS podcast. So again, for Ryan Dunleavy, Marc Lawrence, Jim Feist, from Greg DePalma, we'll see you next time.